lesson on Sport England, and we're going to continue with what we started last lesson to look at the national partners of Sport England and how they affect what goes on within our society. So our key aims and objectives of today's lesson are to identify or continue to identify the role that Sport England has to play within our society, particularly the role that it has to play with developing grassroots sports. That's a phrase that we're going to keep going on about, grassroots sports, and how grassroots sports is affected by the programmes that Sport England and its partners run. We're going to apply our knowledge of specific schemes and initiatives that are in place in order to drive forward social change amongst underrepresented groups in sport. And we're going to analyse the role that Sport England and its national partners play in increasing participation for all of us. Now, homework from last week. I asked you to go away and I asked you to look at one of Sport England's 10 partners, and the partner that I asked you to look at was the Child Protection in Sport unit, the CPSU unit. So let's just take a couple of minutes just to have a quick chat now and see what you found out about the CPSU. Well, the CPSU is specifically dealing with the base level of the participation pyramid right to the very end, and it's very much links with school sport. So the Child Protection in Sport unit can come in, can deal with physical education, which we know is sport that takes place for everybody across the whole nation, but it will also deal specifically with voluntary groups who deal with sport within society. So it could be your local football clubs, it could be your local netball clubs. Child Protection Sport Unit plays an incredibly important role. There are so many examples now within our society of perhaps in the past where we've seen abuse of rights. There is a huge case going through in the United States of America at this moment in time against USA Gymnastics. They had a physio, I think his name was Larry off the top of my head, a physio who is up on charges of indecent abuse of hundreds of adolescent gymnasts, including Simone Biles, who is a multiple Olympic and world champion. And it's a huge thing. And will USA Gymnastics survive? It will be interesting to see. I think certainly potentially the litigation that can come into play could be massive there, and they may end up having to rebrand and have a brand new governing body brought into place because of that. As you can see, the Child Protection unit in sport links specifically with the NSPCC, which we all know about, things like Childline within our society, very, very widely publicised. So the NSPCC will work particularly with the Child Protection in Sport unit. Founded in 2001 with the UK Sports Council and national governing bodies, the CPSU will work directly with the county sports partners. Now, we talked about this county sport partnership last lesson and the lesson before, and we found out that our local one was called Active Sussex. So that's where we got to last time round. Your homework for today's lesson is to look into another one of the 10 national partners of Sport England. And what you're going to look at today is you're going to look at the Cricket Foundation. In fact, you're going to look at two, the Cricket Foundation and the Football Foundation. Now, the Cricket Foundation, as you will find out as you go on to research them, has pretty much rebranded itself now as Chance to Shine. So you're going to look at those two groups towards the back end of today's lesson. So this is where we pretty much finished up last time round. We talked about this idea of Sport England, and I've just got a video for you to watch now. Let's see what you make of this video.
Everyone can feel down at times, but it is surprising how a bit of exercise can help. You don't even have to go to the expense of joining a gym. Simple things like riding a bike, walking the dog, or walking to the shops to buy a newspaper can all help for starters. Physical activity really does release chemicals to our brain, which affects our mood and makes us happier, giving us a greater sense of well-being. You know that just getting out and getting a little fresh air can really make you feel better. There's so many opportunities to become more active. Physical activities releases chemicals into your brain, making you feel better. Walking the dog, to the shops, around the park, in the country, swimming, cycling, or playing with the kids, going to the gym or jogging round the block. Any exercise will make you feel more confident, less stress, a little fitter, and gives you a great sense of achievement. Join a local walking group or exercise referral scheme. Gardening, or why not invest some time in an allotment? You'll be amazed at the results, as well as lowering your chances of heart disease and obesity. So whether it's getting together with friends or learning a new skill, get active. But then you know what makes you feel good. You know, you choose.
Now, I thought that was particularly topical when we were considering the current lockdown situation that we're in, and this message that we've had here in the UK, that it's important to take exercise, and people could take up to an hour a day, now as much physical activity as they like, within certain restrictions. And this is something that our society is very much based on. Let's take Spain, for example, as a society that went into lockdown. In Spain, youngsters weren't allowed to go out. They weren't allowed an hour's physical activity a day. They actually had to remain locked up. So when their first steps towards lockdown being removed took place, the first thing that you saw lots of local youngsters do in Spain was the ability to come out of their flats, to come out of their houses in order to take part in sport. Now, things that I want you to consider. We talked about this DCMS survey last time round, and DCMS, again, let's go back, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. The DCMS and Sport England had these slightly different surveys and had this very much difference in the numbers that came through. Remember, the DCMS said that 69% of people in the UK were active, whereas Sport England said only 21% were active. And it's very much based on these two key phrases that we're going to come across over the next couple of minutes about the type of data that we use. Now, it's all the way to do with the categorization of people and the way in which data is received. Now, some surveys use qualitative data. Now, qualitative data is about words, is about why we take part in sport. Whereas quantitative data will be about numbers and facts and figures to participation within sport. So, a 4-mark question for you. Let's have a go at this question now. Levels of participation in physical activity drop when individuals leave full-time education. Explain some of the possible reasons for this occurrence. 4 marks, 4 minutes. Away you go. So let's have a look at some of the possible reasons why there might be this drop-off in sport. So, reason number 1, when we're in full-time education, sport is given to us. Physical activity is part of our core program. Up until pretty much the age of 16, it is compulsory. I say pretty much. There has been increasing tendencies over the last few years for some education establishments to lower the time given towards sport, Key Stage 4. And we know that once we reach 16, that compulsory element goes. There will be an element of sport at college or at school sixth form, but it's very much about individual choice. So are there opportunities out there in the wider world? If they are they advertised well? Are they structured in such a way that they can be affordable to you and I to take part in? School sport is generally free. There may be some activities that involve buy-in, but generally there isn't a huge amount of money changing hands for actually having to take part or participate in sport. So the question is, where are the opportunities? Are there facilities available for you to take part in the activities that you might have learned at school or that you fancy taking part in? And is there the infrastructure? So are there groups of people that are going to encourage you, to welcome you, to participate on a regular basis? Resources. Now that's really, really important. The equipment, is the equipment provided for you, or is it really expensive to take part? I think particularly about things like skateboarding and roller skating and things like that. Is there a physical resource that you can go and use? Well, we know in Chichester you now have the skate park located at the Westgate, but think about the estates that make up Chichester. So if you live out on Swanfield Estate, or what was called the Old Orlitz Estate, is there something very, very close to you that's going to allow you to skate? If you live in Selsey, is there a skate park? If you live in Bognor, is there that opportunity? Well, yeah, there are. There are those opportunities for skateboarding are in place for you. But what about other activities? What about other sports? Let's say I went to an independent school my earlier years. Are there resources out there in the community for me to continue to play lacrosse or activities such as that? It's a question that we want to ask ourselves and consider when answering such a question. Discrimination. Well, countries like South Africa and the United States have had a huge amount of publicised discrimination in the past. We know all about the American discrimination that took place and how slavery was used in America. And the 1980s and 1970s, the Anti-Apartheid Act that took place in South Africa was a huge thing. And in fact, South Africa were banned from competing at world level in sport for a number of years because they had this segregation between blacks and whites. I've asked you specifically to look at the film Invictus, which looked at how South Africa, through their rugby team, tried to break down sport, and we saw this black winger Chester Williams involved there. I think really it's last year's World Cup win, which is the major turning point for South African sport, because it was great them winning that first World Cup with the odd black player, but now we're seeing nearly half and half between black and white players within that South African team, and we saw the South African team captained by a black player for the first time. Do some people discriminate against themselves? And this was a question that I asked you last time around when we considered areas of the country in which we lived. Do particular cultures discriminate or say sport's not really that important to us? It's not as important as education. It's not as important as certain jobs. So think about that really, really carefully in your answers. How are we going to word that in there? So we talked about self-discrimination. Perhaps it's a case in self-discrimination about the clothing that we wear or the religious rules that are in place for us. If we're Muslim and we're a Muslim lady, we're not allowed necessarily to be seen by other males other than our husbands. And what impact does that have on swimming pools? What impact does that have on how much of the human body can be shown in public? There's been a huge amount of interest going on in terms of media interest towards some African and Asian women participating in sport who come from traditional Muslim countries. Are they breaking tradition? Are they breaking rules by participating? Are they wearing the correct clothing? Are they doing the things that women are expected to do within their countries? Peer pressure is a big thing, isn't it, within our society? You know, we may talk about gangs and groups that appear, and it's amazing how gangs and groups and peers around us can influence our decisions to take part in sport. I can think back to you guys as a year group, and I can think back to perhaps some of the groups that you hang around with or hung around with at the time. And that person always seemed like a bit of a laugh while you were with them. But actually, did they get you involved in things that you really didn't necessarily want to do? Did you find yourself getting into conflict with teachers or with other people that actually wasn't anything to do with you, but was to do with the group that you hang around with? And that's really important because that can influence our participation in sport. So I'll go back to sociology lessons that we did at the start of the unit where we talked about secondary socialization. Our peers can influence our decisions to participate in sport. So those were some of the key points that we perhaps should have been getting into those answers, and I'm sure you've got lots of others that you'd like to discuss or you'd like to bring forward. So if you've got any others, let's take that opportunity now just to have a look at them. So I talked to you about these two key phrases, and let's go back to this now, about what's going on within our society. So DCMS, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, love their surveys, and they're all about gaining figures about participation without actually looking in depth at those figures. So the type of research that the Department for Culture, Media and Sport is, they just want numbers on the board. So they just want quantitative research. It's just about that figure. Do you take part in sport? Yes or no? Oh, 69% of people said yes. That's called quantitative data. However, Active England may ask for qualitative data. They also want to know things in a greater depth. So their surveys are more detailed. They're going to have more wording involved. They might want to find out your opinion. Why don't you take part in sport? And the phrase that we're looking for when we look at these types of surveys are qualitative data. Qualitative data. We talked about equality and equity last time round, and we touched on those two key phrases at the end. And Tom came up with this great picture during the lesson. Let's see if I can. So here is that picture that Tom showed us that I tried to describe to you last time round. Now you can actually see it in the light, that we've got equality, this idea that everybody gets to stand on the same platform. So we've got these three individuals here trying to watch a game of baseball. It looks like baseball there over the fence. You've got a very tall person, you've got a medium-sized person, you've got a small person. They're all stood on a box in order to get a view. And I'm assuming that that small person may be looking through a crack in the fence in order to see what's going on. But that is not equity. Equity is about giving everyone the same opportunity, okay, to experience the same thing. So it could be about monetary value. And in this particular example, you've seen that the tall person who could always see over the fence has given his box to the shortest person to allow the shortest person to see over the fence. So that's this idea of equality and equity within sport. So we'll continue. Equality of opportunity. So a key phrase that we need to bear in mind is it's about an equal chance to participate regardless of gender, sexual preference, age, race, and social class. That is race underneath my picture there. Okay, so again, equality of opportunity, an equal chance to participate regardless of gender, sexual preference, age, race, and social class. What we use in order to achieve equality doesn't really matter. Within our society, Sport England in particular will look at what the particular activity is that might drive through a particular community. So it may be in an area such as Havant or Lee Park in particular, that they feel that just getting out and participating through football and building lots of 4G football pitches might allow more of that community to take part in sport. Whereas perhaps if we went into inner city Portsmouth, it might not be football. It's really bad examples say it might not be football. Of course, it's going to be football in Portsmouth, but it may be that boxing is more of an appropriate activity for that particular community. So Sport England aren't necessarily interested in one particular sport. They're interested in how we create that equity and equality of opportunity through the sporting activities that they can offer. We talked last lesson as well about this idea of the public sector and the voluntary sector or private sector. The public sector is what is funded and what is paid for by the government. The government have a particular responsibility through the DCMS, Department for Culture, Media and Sport, in order to ensure that there is as many different activities on offer to the public as possible. But they will always consider of what is already there via private sector. Now, we talked about the fact that we had golf courses in Chichester, but actually those golf courses aren't about the fact that in Chichester we have golf courses. We don't need a public golf course. And the reason that we don't need a public golf course is we've got various different private golf courses where members of the public can pay in order to go and play. They're not going to get the same benefits as the private members, but nevertheless, they still have an opportunity to take part. And that's really key to this particular point, that it enables people within our community to have an opportunity to do something. Inclusiveness is a key phrase that's been used within education over the last 15 years. So this idea of inclusivity means that we can include people from all different races, backgrounds, disability. Now we're talking about accessibility of the community to sport. We don't want there to be barriers to participation. Those barriers could be things like financial constraint. They could be accessibility constraints. They could be barriers such as there are certain membership rules in place. So golf has been a sport which has traditionally over the years been a man's game. And I think it was Royal Troon in Scotland in the last 2 to 3 years has got itself into an awful lot of bother for the English Open because it refuses to drop its membership rules on women. And therefore the British Open has said, well, Royal Troon will not host the British Open anymore until something changes there. So there are always barriers to participation that we have to consider when we're thinking about sport. So your job now is to go from here, and your job is to look at two particular organisations that work in partnership with Sport England. And these are two particular sports that we're looking at today. How do they work with Sport England to develop opportunity through their particular activities? So what I'm asking you to look at is the Cricket Foundation, which you will find under Chance to Shine, and the Football Foundation. Remember, exactly the same as what we looked at last time round. Who are they? What do they do? What impact are they having? Who, what, impact. Who, what, impact. See you next lesson.